a very warm welcome to you wherever you are in the world. And we really do have people from all over the world. My name is Danny Morris, and I lead GLA's coaching team. And I'm your host for today. We've got a great panel for you today. So when I introduce you, if you can just wave or something like that so we know where you are. But James Baker, who's an old friend of GLA. So James is head of HR overseas for Jaguar Land Rover. Lovely to see you, James. Thanks for joining us. We've got Professor Bill Torbert, who's a co-founder of GLA and who, well, he dreamed up this whole thing. So it's great to have you, Bill. We've got Elaine Herdman-Barker, who is another one of the big brains in vertical development. And she's one of my two favorite bosses. So I'm glad she's here today. We also have two of our most experienced coaches to really sort of help you grapple with this. We've got Trish Silber, and we've also got the legend that is Nick Owen. What are we grappling with today? Well, we're grappling with the transforming action logic. So we've seen a lot of growth in people profiling at redefining over recent years. But has that movement gone into transforming as well? What's going on there? What's going on with that movement? Anecdotally, as coaches at GLA, we'll often hear people talking about, or clients or leaders talking about how they're interested in profiling at transforming. So what's going on with transforming it? What's alluring about it? So we're going to be looking at that movement into transforming during this seminar, but also we're going to be looking at what can be done to nurture that transition. So that's my frame for the session. And I'm going to start asking the panel some questions now. And first up, it's you, Elaine. Elaine, what's your interest in the move from redefining to transforming?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Danny. Good to see you all. Well, I knew you were going to ask me this question. And when I had just some few moments to think about it, for me, it's about hope. I think hope is the interest, and it's at the very heart of what we're talking about with the redefining and transforming action logics. And, you know, it exists throughout the action logic, but it feels particularly present at these later action logics and how we relate to them. And what that means to me is that there's this hope for ourselves, for our own development, our own self-fulfillment, our own self-awareness. But it's more than that. It's how that then leads on to how we are living alongside others. So the hope of a ripple. So the hope of a ripple further into society and the possibility of broader scale change.
Given that many organizations are so keen to help that development to transforming, what do you make of the fact that relatively few people are profiling at transforming?
Yeah, that's curious, isn't it? And again, you know, that gives me pause because there's so many angles to go in at. Just a couple of threads, perhaps, which we explore through this afternoon, is the idea that we're all influenced by our environment. And what we are hearing from clients is that the environment is not necessarily supporting redefining leaders to follow through on their commitments to bring about change. And we need to understand that more to get alongside these redefining leaders in order to get closer to their experience, because we're finding that the fullness of the redefining potential is not necessarily coming into action. And if we haven't got our muscles out in redefining, then it's difficult to have that lean, I'd suggest, into transforming. So, you know, maybe it's how we get a bit more muscular and full at the redefining. And the other area, I just want to turn the question inside out a bit, Danny, and take it from what's not happening at Redefining to perhaps what's the fullness of transforming. So what are these shards of light of transforming that we could be looking at more closely in order to help that development? Again, often talk about the balloons now. And the balloon representing taking different perspectives and inflating our perspective. And here we have, let's imagine the grey balloon is redefining. So taking a distance from the ground below, being able to take a bird's eye view. And that might be helping us to have some freedom from some old restrictions. We're able just to have perhaps a bit of a liberation as we can take a distance. And also, we deliberately take a distance. We might be separating ourselves off from the environments that we're in. And that has sometimes not such a positive effect. And if so, if you just move into the slide for transforming, if you just take a look at this slide for a moment, and perhaps just think for yourselves what this might be representing for transforming. For me, it's about at transforming, we are really in the picture. We've moved from observing it to being right in the thick of it. And Bill's spoken for many years about interdependencies, or Bill, I'm not going to get this right, interindependencies. We're in the thick of it. You know, we're in this complex web. We're experiencing how we are with others, the community of leading, the fellowness of leading. And it's this that I think is often getting missed in the conversations about transforming. It can sometimes feel like quite a technical conversation when actually it's about being in the joy and the thrust of fellow human beings and the world that we're part of. It's a collective endeavor. And that is something that is felt. It's something that people have passion for. And it's something that's lived alongside other people.
That, you know, someone's way of meaning making, so their action logic, will only evolve when they need a more complex way to understand the world around them. You could conclude that for many leaders, redefining is currently an adequate complexity, right? But that means it's adequate for them. And that's a really important point to pause on, because it could be adequate for them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's adequate for the employees of the organization, for the shareholders of the organization, for the society that the organization is acting in. What is the collective action logic of the top management team, right? Because that is what is going to set the organizational behavior. And I think if you've got a really good top management team, they can put in place the elements of a people system, right, that will drive the right leadership behavior that will get to an effective organization, because that thinking is being set by the top management team. And for me, the most important person within the company to be transforming action logical later is the CEO.
Bill, I'd like to draw you in on this as well. I mean, obviously you've spent so long researching this. Why do you think so few people are profiling at transforming and making that move?
Well, because the movement from redefining to transforming is a movement from merely a subjective change in perspective, as each of the earlier action logic transformations are, but now it's putting that perspective in action in everyday life. It's a practice rather primarily. It recognizes, it's an ideology that recognizes the primacy of practice, no matter what you believe and think and how many sophisticated perspectives you have, if you're not able to enact a more collaborative, inclusive form of mutual power, then you don't understand and aren't operating at the transforming action logic. So, and it involves developing a capacity to be present in the moment to your own action and everybody else's action, so that now you have the possibility of making an intervention. You're not simply being carried along by the flow of talk and the meanings in the words. You're constantly comparing them to the action that's going on, and whether that is actually supporting a collaborative inquiry into the new, into the crisis, rather than just playing around on the surface. And of course, part of that is being present in the present is the capacity to offer different types of feedback, more than just single loop feedback to reach a goal we've already agreed on, but double loop feedback, which permits us to transform the structure of what we're doing as individuals or as the whole group.
And James, could you say a little bit about how people at transforming action logic engage with the organization?
Yeah, look, I mean, it depends. I'm very lucky to have worked with a number of people that operate at that logic, right? And just because we engage with GLA and the GLP for some time, right? So it's quite interesting. It's like doing a very, very long, longitudinal academic study, because you kind of got to see and observe people in action. And honestly, it depends on so many different things. There's what's going on within the individual. There's differences in personality. There's difference in background, identity, and all of these types of things. And of course, there's also difference in role, right? At what level are they within the organization? There's this assumption that, of course, the more I think I even started with this assumption. You take like Elliot Jack's work, is not surely the more senior people are going to be the more cognitively complex. Well, actually, no, that's not necessarily the case. And my observation is, at more junior levels of the organization, it can. My experience is it can land as a fantastic bridge, right, and an ability to integrate multiple perspectives. That ability to truly listen and not be threatened by external expertise is a great bridge and a consolidator of ideas and learning and perspectives. I guess one of the reasons to be interested in the GLP or vertical theory is in organizational transformation, right? One of the things that I've seen transforming leaders at relatively senior levels do very, very effectively is kind of hold the space, right, to create the conversations for the transformation to occur, right? So, and that's a really important point for me. So dispensing with the idea of like the ideas flowing from the leader, to the people, but literally holding that kind of space for the recognition for the need to change, to emerge, to really build a coalition for change.
Bill, in your work, you write about different stages of organizations. What is it that transforming leaders adjust to at different stages of an organization?
Well, a couple of things on this issue of the organizational stage. The first one is that actually, as you begin to move toward the post-conventional action logics, including, first of all, redefining, but then more so transforming, you do become aware that there are differences at different times. There aren't generalizations that apply to all times and places. Beyond that kind of knowledge, there's a more intimate kind of knowledge of what's the time now in terms of this organization. And as those of you who've read about the organizational stages know, they move back and forth between more centralized and more decentralized. So a leader or a consultant needs to have a point of view that can move back and forth and help the organization move back and forth between a more centralized and a more decentralized perspective. So this one is gradually learning the element of timing. Now, when one starts entering the redefining posture, one becomes aware of how one doesn't believe in the holy cows of the organization. One becomes critical of them, but one hasn't yet learned how to insert that criticism in a timely way. So sometimes the redefining folks get shut down, but the transforming action logic helps you to figure out what is the right time to raise this question. That doesn't mean everybody's going to agree with you immediately. In fact, you may very well be shut down the first 2 times you raise the issue. But if you continue to feel that that's an issue for the group or the organization, you'll want to come back with more strength of voice and purpose a 3rd time. And that's something that most people at earlier action logics wouldn't have the courage to do. But at the transforming action logic, you're aware of how sticky all the earlier action logics are, and they don't just come around with a single suggestion.
I'd like to draw in Trish and Nick to this bit. Trish, just reading what people have been saying, how does this resonate with what you're seeing in practice as a coach?
I'm finding that them really working on how they connect with other action logics from that. I think one person in our group mentioned that transcend and include, that I'm connecting with others in action logics, not from a place of fallback, but from a place of transcend and include. And how do I become more available as a visible thought partner as a transforming leader? So we talked about some of those kinds of things. The only other thing I would add very quickly is that I am seeing that redefining network, that's so important, that as people move to transforming, that network does need to shift. That there's something about being with other transforming leaders around that timely action, courage, those pieces. So finding those people to be in conversation with is also helps one moves into transforming.
I kind of noticed 3 different areas. One was what skills are available or not to someone at redefining. The second area was what is there within the system, within the context that might be holding people back. We've touched on that earlier on. And what is going on in their inner redefining world that may be holding them back within themselves. So, for example, in terms of skills, I find that a lot of people I talk to at redefining often are still carrying an achiever sense of chasing time, which partly it's that they haven't got the skills to prioritize and find strategic time and allies at later stage who can work with them strategically. And they're getting pulled back into the mire, into the weeds. So that's one thing. And another area which I come across quite often, which I think holds people back from moving into transforming, is not having a practice to look deeper within themselves. And it seems to me that unless that process occurs, it's very hard to have the inner complexity to grapple with the outer complexity.
I'm going to start with Ross's that he asked earlier. It's in the chat. And he's curious about the degree to which the organization's incentive structure reinforces more conventional action logics, and whether redefining to transforming action logics often occur with a greater separation from the organization in which one is previously embedded. Bill, could you speak to this, please?
Well, of course, if the organization has and institutes types of scaffolding and structure, which I call liberating disciplines, which in fact very much propel double loop feedback and transformation, then you're going to be helpful to the redefining to transforming action logic. And on the other hand, it's also true that a lot of people help themselves move into redefining by leaving an organization altogether and taking up a coaching type role, for example. And of course, the phrase is interestingly ambiguous. With greater separation from the organization in which one was previously embedded, that could be psychological separation while still staying in the organization, which a coach can help one to achieve potentially, and a community of people who are interested in this kind of inquiry could help. I think it's very often helpful to create triads, to find two other people who will have lunch with you once every 2 weeks over Zoom nowadays, to talk about problems you have in your own action in the organization. It's good to have trios because it's good to have more than one other voice, but it's good not to have more than 3 because then it gets difficult to schedule. So I think 3 is a kind of optimum number for that.
There's another question in the chat for James, and it's from James. Is what changes would you make to JLR to increase its openness to action logic development, and what is actually blocking that?
Well, look, I mean, the good news is we're kind of doing the stuff that I think we should be doing, right? So, you know, in the first instance, the biggest change you can make to an organization is by the people that lead it, right? So, you know, the first thing we started doing was deliberately hiring people that were, you know, highly competent leaders, functionally and technically. But you know, also, you know, one of the things we looked at was what was their action logic, right? Because that had implications in terms of how they led and the culture of the organization, you know, that sat underneath it, and the function and the dysfunction from an organizational effectiveness standpoint. And McKinsey worked this out a long time ago. You know, their organizational health you know, matrix is really based on developmental theory, right? So so that's one point. And then the second point is you need to start rewarding within leaders and getting leaders to pay attention to kind of some of the things they should be doing that they probably would be doing if they were later stage in the first place, right? So, you know, one of the simple things, like why do organizations have engagement scores, right? You know, engagement scores exist to give the employees a voice. Yeah, you know, I don't know whether anyone's familiar with Boehm's theory of reverse dominance. It's a wonderful thing in the academic literature, which comes from hunter-gatherer societies, right? Which is basically says, in the old hunter-gatherer days, if you had a bad leader, you could walk up to your leader if he was generally unpopular and bonk him over the head if he wasn't treating his people terribly well. Now, of course, you know, modern organizations don't have that kind of feedback loop. So organizations try and create different mechanisms. So, you know, you can try and celebrate you know, leaders that develop other leaders, right? That's a really, really important facet. And, you know, different people over time have described the process of developing other leaders and redefining what leadership is from a hierarchical construct to everyone's a leader, right? As important things. So one of the things that we did is we created a leadership framework, right, which gave the definition of leadership a much broader range of behavioral flexibility, right? It wasn't just about delivering results, it was how you deliver results. It wasn't, it was also about collaborating with others.
Andy's got a question here. Can you say more about the embodiment of collaborative inclusive power in the transforming leader and the transforming gravity of a senior leadership team?
There's a complex generosity, I would say, to a transforming leader who's working well in action from the transforming action logic. And that generosity is something that James touched on, to empower others to develop and grow and contribute, and to empower conversations in organizations that are testing and challenging. So it's a really reaching out in the true sense of dialogue rather than sitting in monologue that can be so tempting sometimes. So in a very simplistic sense, it's sitting in a generosity of spirit for being alongside other people in life.
And thank you all of you for your contributions today. And we look forward to seeing you in January